They don't want you to be able to use this technology anymore. And they're probably worried about finding condoms and stuff inside, frankly. But that's not what it's built for necessarily. Maybe it was. Some of these barrows are longer, and you also have the mound builders in the U.S. You have all these other things like Serpent Mound in Ohio that you can go to and see this in the U.S. I'm only doing the English ones right now. Henges is the one that everybody's so familiar with and everybody loves, because now you get standing stones like the single ones you were seeing before, except now there's certain areas where the energetics are so high that long rows of stones are being put together because it's going to be even more powerful. The sheep really like being near these stones. In fact, animal life really can feel this more than we can. These were not put there by accident. And again, in this case, you have a combination of a barrow and a henge. You have the henge at the front here, and if you go through that path down the middle, you go into the barrow, and you go inside and you meditate. Maybe the henge in the front helps focus the energy that's flowing through the center of the barrow. Here's another henge out there just hanging out in the middle of the English countryside, and some of them are in France, some of them are in Germany. They're in Ireland too. They're all over the place. Here's another one. Of course, here's another one. Here's another example. One of the most impressive, which unfortunately has been lost to the ravages of time to a large degree, is Avebury. Now, what you're going to see here, if you look closely, is that all of these different stones, all of these different little dots that you see as you go along here represent individual stones. This looks like a giant serpent. Here's the head. And here's what it's eaten in its stomach. If you look up at the top in the middle there's two little rings of stones inside. That represents the meal, and then here's the tail down at the bottom. Down here is one of the barrows. This is Silbury Hill, the best barrow of all, the most famous one and the most well-structured one. Look at the geometry. Look at how it's a perfect equilateral triangle between the head of the snake, the tail of the snake, Silbury in the middle, and then here's the area up here. Now, what this was for, this was a gigantic technology. This is a machine. It's a machine that's built based on, if you look around it, the contours of the mountains, the contours of the land, so that a bunch of people get inside this area right here and they have a big party and they all meditate and chant and run around and do fun stuff. And they're changing consciousness for themselves and for the planet. That's what this stuff was built for. It's a consciousness technology. Of course, Stonehenge being the greatest example of all, these sarsen stones, as they're called, are gigantic in size and very beautiful to look at. What you may not realize is that at one time there was a whole ring of them like this. That's what it used to look like, and all the stones that have fallen have been identified in the soil, because the more they fall down over time, the more that it rains each year, they fall further and further into the ground, but they've all been found. So this is known to be true. I'm not making this up. What we know is that Stonehenge was used to identify solstices and when the moon and the sun were traveling and what would happen, because during certain planetary alignments, certain times of the year, these zones on the Earth became much more energetically active. Are these ancient structures connected? The answer is yes, through the signs of ley lines. This was done by Sir Alfred Watkins, and we're going to talk a little bit about him. He found in the 1920s that ancient holy sites lined up in straight lines, which he called leys. Sites from extremely different ages, millennia apart, were all aligned with one another. This includes the Neolithic Age, which is Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the Christian era. Now, he would use this camera to basically be able to look across long distances and see if things were in a straight line. And what you see here is the summary of a massive amount of research that he did. What you see here is every single one of these words is a different ancient sacred site. Nobody ever comes out in the open and says, oh, by the way, all these sacred sites are built in a straight line. It took a guy like Alfred Watkins to analyze this and discover it for himself. But guess what a lot of these things are? They're cathedrals. Do you think that maybe the Knight Templars knew that there was something going on? Do you think that maybe they knew to build on that line and not to build off the line? Do you think that maybe if you build a church which acts as a funnel for this consciousness energy, that if you build that domed roof for the church out of stone over that line, that it's going to harness more of this energy field from the universe, and that in so doing, it's going to become a resonator so that when you go to church, you're going to be experiencing a revelation, a higher consciousness? Do you think that maybe the stained glass window and the Gregorian chant music are creating harmonics that help you harmonize with the field? Absolutely. So here's some people from his Stonehenge club, the Straight Track Club as it was called, the ley line hunters. Here's a barrow that had trees growing around it. Here's a similar ring of trees without a barrow. This is a natural earth effect caused by these energy fields because they do have circular formations. Well, it is a hyperdimensional effect. These are harnessing hyperdimensional energy because the hyperdimensional energy is what makes the matter that is building the stones. Let me say that again. The matter that makes these stones, the stone itself, the actual hard stuff, is built from hyperdimensional energy, energy from the time field that's flowing into our space-time. That's what, according to Dr. Dewey Larson, all matter is built from, is this hyperdimensional exchange between three-dimensional time and three-dimensional space. That's all it is. So, of course, you're going to get time anomalies, but it's also the energy that builds you. It builds your DNA, it builds your body, so when you get more of it flowing through you, you're going to have more health and vitality. And because it's the energy of your consciousness, because it is consciousness, it's also going to give you a more advanced intellect. So the way that we can actually prove that this global grid, these energy lines, has a hyperdimensional effect that can completely pull you out of our three space of length, width, and height, the three-dimensional world, is with the research of Ivan Sanderson. He investigated a massive number of different disappearances of ships and airplanes. What he did is he took everything from every single ancient, everything from the dawn of aviation, going all the way back to the first airplanes and even before that for the marine records. He looked for every case of disappearance since planes were discovered. And he found that the majority of what he was finding all clustered around 12 points on the Earth's surface. That's completely unprecedented. That's not mainstream information. It was done in the 1960s. This guy should have been treated with as much respect as somebody like Edison or Einstein or Alexander Graham Bell or the Wright brothers, because this is a huge discovery. 12 key points around the world in which planes and ships are spontaneously disappearing. He wasn't looking, he didn't have anything in mind when he started doing this. All he did is he looked up each one and he gave it a push pin, push pin, push pin. And where were all the push pins at the end? They were in 12 places. Even stranger is that the 12 places are not just haphazardly scattered around the Earth, they're all equally distant from each other. They're harmonically balanced with one another. They're all the same distance apart when you look to the ones that are adjacent to each other. If you connect the dots, you get a sacred geometry, which happens to be the same geometry that's in the polio virus, the same geometry that's in many other viruses at the quantum level, including HIV. But it's not just a negative, toxic thing like viruses. It's a very positive thing that's the fundamental building block of physical matter and biology and life. It's an icosahedron. Now, here we go. This is the Bermuda Triangle. Obviously, you know about this one. Believe me when I tell you that there are many, many airplane disappearances that cannot be explained, where they've never found oil slick or flotsam on the surface of the water. All they find is a missing plane. It's on the radar 1 minute, it's gone the next. There's no oil slick, there's no wreckage, nothing. And they don't find anything on the surface, on the bottom of the ocean floor either. It's gone. What happened is it's passing through a portal. It's passing through a time gate. A gate into another frequency of reality, a parallel universe in which time is three-dimensional. Here are the 12 points that he discovered with his push pins. Take a close look. You see the Bermuda Triangle off the coast of Florida. You see another one near Brazil in South America. You see another one here on the land in Africa, another one down here by Sri Lanka. You see one that's the Himalayan mountains, all that crazy stuff like the Master and Teachings of the Far East, Tibet, all that stuff up there. You got some that are out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean here, which is a real lonely area to get stuck in. The Easter Island is down here. And then you got one here, which is the Devil's Triangle. That's officially been declared a disaster area by the Japanese government. They do not allow you to fly or sail through this area.